Hey everybody, my name is Ron Cecil. I'm a men's life coach and co-host of the podcast Cutting for Sign, based in Portland, Oregon. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, and I've been honestly a little bit afraid to. And here's why. I think if you've ever struggled with something in your life, especially something that you've tried to stop over and you can't, you can build a lot of shame around that. And for me, up until I was about 34 years old, that was a drinking problem. Now, I never got too rowdy with my drinking. I did have some social experiences with people I loved who trusted me and loved me, where I made huge mistakes because of alcohol in my life. And the reality is, I think it probably contributed to a divorce I went through in my early 20s. Now, once I went through that divorce, you'd think I'd probably slow down, but I actually drank more. And the drinking career had to expand as my life went on. And at that time, I was living in England, which has a strong drinking culture. And I couldn't keep up, even though I tried, but I was still blacking out a couple times a week. What do I mean by blacking out is I would drink until I couldn't remember. I was doing that a few times a week. Then I started a new life. I got into a relationship, started a family, and the alcohol kind of stayed at arm's length, although it started to sneak up on me again. And when I really noticed when it was getting out of control was when I started to put the puzzle pieces together that all of my biggest fights with my wife were preceded with drinking. Not necessarily heavy drinking, but certainly drinking. And what's more is I had adopted my wife's son, and I fell in love with that kid. He and I were just fast father and son. You know, because of the adoption process, because of his experience not having a birth dad like a typical guy would, he's gonna have some of his own struggles. And I am noticing that alcohol does not help my experience with anger as a dad. And I would fly off the handle and rage and yell. I never hurt him, but I certainly scared him. And I scared my daughter at the time, who was a little girl at the time, with my yelling and billowing and just my kind of out of control rage. And I had this moment of clarity, as they say, where I thought, he's already got to have issues. Everyone's going to deal with whatever they're going to deal with growing up. And I know that if I continue on this path, I'm going to just contribute to that. I'm only going to make it worse in some way. And I don't need to do that anymore. I took this step, which is the point of this whole video, is I Googled the phrase, how do I know if I'm an alcoholic? And maybe that's how you got here. How do I know I'm an alcoholic? No one can tell you're an alcoholic except for you. Number one. Number two, what I found was some kind of diagnostic tool, right? Which is not really a diagnostic tool because there's not like this thing that says, click here and you are. I found this tool that had 20 questions. And the questions were, you probably asked yourself around alcoholism. Do you drink more than you want to? In other words, when you want to stop, can you stop? Yes or no. When you do stop, can you continue? Can you stay stopping? Does it stay in control or does it come back with a vengeance? Yes or no? Questions like that. Do you enjoy drinking anymore? Do you get to the point where drinking becomes unenjoyable, but you do it anyway because you have to do it to feel normal? Yes or no, right? On and on, just like this. And I'll link at the bottom of this to a diagnostic that's similar to it. And I get to the end of it and it said, if you've answered yes to more than 2 questions on here, then you have a problem with drinking. If you've answered questions to more than to 3, then you are probably an alcoholic. And if you've answered yes to more than 4, then you are an alcoholic. And I started laughing because I was like, yes, on out of the 20 questions. And it was so surprising to me because I didn't have this crazy career of drinking that ended in like car crashes and people harmed, and it wasn't ugly. I kept a really nice looking exterior. I was really good at hiding my drinking. I would go through periods of stress and I would drink a lot in secret. I remember one time being on a vacation with my wife, I think we went 3 months without drinking, and we went on vacation, and the vacation ended up being way more stressful than I thought it was going to be for various reasons. She and I were fighting. I decided to start drinking, and instead of drinking like a normal person, like by the pool, I had a bottle of tequila that I was hiding in the closet of our hotel and just drinking it down. So if you're questioning, and one of the other questions, and I think this is important to realize, is I think it was in that first Google search. It said, if you're searching, how do I know an alcoholic? You're probably an alcoholic. So if you're searching now, like I did then, you probably need help, my man or woman. And I'd say, go find help. Go do what I did. Is I called a few friends, called 3 friends actually. I sent an email out. I said, hey guys, this is the pattern in my life. I'm being not as good as I want. And the common thing I'm noticing with it is every time I make these mistakes, it's alcohol somehow involved. They did an amazing thing, and they invited me out for breakfast. We had breakfast, and someone there said, have you tried AA? I was like, hell no, I haven't. I would not try AA. And they go, just consider it. And here's a number of somebody who we know is in that program, and go check it out. It was literally a friend offering a friend's number. That's all it was. And I called that guy up, and I went to my first meeting. And I thought when I went to my first meeting that I wanted to crawl out of my skin, and that I just didn't belong there. And then over time, what I heard was a group of people describe just never feeling like they completely belonged. And that alcohol suddenly was this amazing solution to feeling like they did belong, and feeling like they could be more social, or they could have a clever answer, or they could attract women or attract men, or they could handle stress of life. There is this idea with alcoholism is that, and I heard this in an AA meeting in my early days, and I've thought about it very often, quite often since then. A lot of us end up in those rooms, is what they call it when you go to a meeting, not because you have a drinking problem, but because you have a life problem. In other words, you can't handle life. Life is too overwhelming. Your job, your career, your relationships, your past, the trauma you're dealing with, whatever it might be. And alcohol was the solution. In other words, all of that pain, dealing with all that pain, you found one tool, or I found one tool that worked, and that was alcohol. And when I used that tool, it worked every time. And I felt better about my experience. And until it didn't, until it didn't. And that is what any ism, alcoholism, workaholism, codependency, under-earning, whatever it might be, is it works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, then you realize, hopefully, that your life is unmanageable and you've got to change. So if you're wondering, am I an alcoholic, and you're hearing or resonating with my story, then perhaps you need to go take the next step. Maybe go Google, find or go click the link below and look at that diagnostic. Maybe actually just call some friends and say you're struggling. Maybe search for an AA meeting near you in your town and go find one. I know because of the time we are now, tons of meetings are online and by phone. And so the resources are there, they are free, they are abundant. And there's always somebody there on the other side willing to help you and willing to walk through this with you in any way, man. So take care of yourself. See you next time.